and welcome to another episode of Talking Bollocks with me, Howard H. Smith, your host, the man with the bollocks. Welcome back, and if you haven't been here before, why not? Hey, this is your first episode? Bit of a Carcass fan, are you? Well, get back through the fucking library and check out all of the stuff you haven't heard. So, I am your host, as I said, Howard H. Smith. You may know me as lead singer of UK thrash band Acid Rain. You may know me as stand-up comedian with the character Keith Platt. You may know me as host of this podcast, Talking Bollocks. You may even know me as co-host of the Old Bollocks podcast, available on this feed, and also the host of the official Motorhead podcast, The Motorcast. That's a lot of stuff, Howard. Yeah, have you not gone on about yourself enough? Yeah, do you know what? I think I have. Okay, so let's get stuck in, shall we? Other than to say, before going anywhere, you'll see a link in the description of the podcast. It'll say support this podcast or join Patreon. Click that link. It's live. It'll take you to Patreon. You can sign up for $6 a month and get the full bollocks. You get a live podcast every month on Zoom. You get a 2-hour radio show. You get albums reviewed. You get all sorts. Okay, so anyway, that's out the way. Let's crack on with, as always, what has been happening in the world of metal since last we spoke. Well, if there was ever a clickbait headline to end all clickbait headlines, then this is it. Dave Ellefson on fallout from his sex video scandal. Now I know how Jesus felt. Now, I'm going to flip-flap, flim-flam, whatever. I'm going to be going backwards and forwards with my opinions on Dave on this, but I think it is a slightly harsh line to drag out, but it's blabbermouth, isn't it? It's clickbait. It's meant to make you read the article. So I did, and I'm reading it now, so you don't have to. But it kind of let's go straight in with this particular section. And it's Dave talking about everything that's happened with his sex scandal recently. And he says, not to use a religious reference, well, he's about to, but I guess I know how Jesus felt. It doesn't sound any better, does it really? Carry your cross and then kill him. Shit, we got the wrong guy. Not to make it a religious thing, but it's just one of those things. I couldn't even believe it. I'm not going to lie. I deserve better than that, which is why I got off social media, I got away from all of that stuff, and I was just like, you know what? I've poured my life into my craft and my work and my art and being a performer and entertainer, and no one deserves to be treated like that. That's just absolutely uncalled for on any level. Now, I agree that the paedophilia stuff being thrown around on social media was absolutely out of order. It's libelous. It was horrific. Okay, but it didn't just fall out of the fucking sky, did it, Dave? You know, it didn't just appear out of nowhere, because this reads like it did, and it didn't, because there was something at the heart of this. So I still kind of feel like he's not taking ownership of, Mr. Lutheran pastor is still quoting, is quoting about Jesus and talking about how horrifically he's being dealt with, whilst not talking about, what he did. So, so he does go on to address it, okay, and he does say, and there's another quote saying, look, admittedly, I've sort of trained the public to think that I'm one of the more well-behaved rock stars out there, and for the most part, I have been. But at the same time, this isn't to claim anything other than that. Just, oops, shit happens. That is what it is. That's not... That doesn't sound very... that doesn't sound like a man who is... who is married and who is a pastor, a man of faith. So it just doesn't address it enough for me. But maybe I'm being over harsh. I'm sure you'll all tell me if you have. But if you start waving your dick around on the internet with European teenagers and it gets filmed, don't be surprised if this kind of fucking shit comes your way, Dave. That's all I'm saying. And like I said, I still don't feel like he's taken full ownership of it and said, yeah, do you know what? I was a fucking idiot. I shouldn't have done it. And, I've still have never seen, and I'm sure he has, but, he's never seen a public apology to his wife, to his family, to his church, to Jesus for that matter. So, and I'm sure, it's all about the forgiveness, isn't it? So, yeah. The story rumbles on, and rumbling on is the new Megadeth album, which is apparently going to be called The Sick, The Dying and The Dead. So Mustaine there cheering us up with an album title, seeing as how we've, we're in the middle of a pandemic, we're getting out of a pandemic or whatever, wherever we are now with the pandemic. The Sick, The Dying and The Dead. Awesome. So, I would imagine there is going to be at least some songs on there that are going to be about stuff. Now, this is interesting, right? Because it says, Dave says, a lot of the riffs have been saved over time. A brand new song can be made of something I wrote when I was 15 or 55. It's a good riff. If it's a good riff, I'll save it, which is cool. It's cool. So I'm looking forward to hearing, 30-year-old riffs, whatever. I don't know. But yeah, what a title. What a title. The Sick, The Dying, and The Dead. Great. Never mind. And moving on to the next story, former Turbo Negro singer Hank Von Hell, dead at 49. Now, I was never a fan of Turbo Negro. I know plenty of people were, and still are. But as somebody who is a singer in a band and 51, it really does kind of make you very aware of your mortality, for that matter. And so R.I.P. Hank Von Hell. Also, original Korn drummer Joey Silvera says on playing with the band for their upcoming anniversary, "You never know," is his quote. "You just never know. Actually, everyone seems to know, other than you, Joey. You're not invited. They don't want you around. You've tried to sue them to get back in the band, you prick. If you were going to play in the fucking anniversary, it would have happened by now." And speaking of other broken relationships between band members, James Labrie says he has no relationship with Mike Portnoy. Now, maybe I'm being a bit harsh on Mike, okay? But if he's not your particular cup of poison, I would imagine being in a band with him could be quite draining, and if he left, you probably wouldn't be keen to stay in touch. As he says, I haven't spoken to Mike, to be quite honest, since he left the band, so I think that pretty much says it all. And it's like, I don't know how Blabbermouth managed to get a whole news story out of that. And it's a massive, well, I do know how they did it, but the whole interview's down. It is available on the article. But I've done you a favour. That's it, basically. That's the only new thing. We also get Blaze Bailey's opinion on Senjutsu, the new Maiden album. And I'm going to go through this. This is Blaze's thoughts. I think it's a deep album, and it's not something that gives itself easily on the first time through. I think you've got to give it a chance. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of mood changing with the chords, and they've done for the instrumentals. So it's that kind of feel. You have to go, what is the story? And then when the instrumental part comes, it's just like an orchestral piece. What are they talking about now? What does this music make me feel? Why has it gone into a dark place? So I think it gives its. So I don't think it gives itself up easily. I don't think it's. But I think it's. I nearly said not. But I think it's a good album, and the things I've heard so far, I really like. I mean, I think that is super diplomatic of Blaze there, because ultimately I think he's saying, look, I played it once and I can't get my head around it. And I know the feeling, Blaze, I really do. It's a bit of a slog, I have to say. It's a bit of a slog. And double albums, I'm still not feeling it. Still not feeling the Maiden album, I have to say. And I've got to say as well, I'm really not feeling Mastodon, Hushed and Grim. I know I'm kind of repeating myself from the last Old Bollocks episode, but it's in no way am I tempted to go back, listen again, give it another chance. I've tried, and it's just, I don't know. Just, it's really not happening for me. It's really not happening for me. So, speaking of singers, talking about albums that are not happening for him, this is literally not happening for him. Rob Halford was asked about KK's Priest's new album, and he said, "Well, I haven't heard it, and when I will, I'll let you know. But I'd much rather stay focused on the celebration of 50 years and on this box set. This box set is an extraordinary representation of this life story that this band has gone through." And you know what? You see what's going on there? Hey, I love it. I love it. Basically, Rob is staying eyes on the prize, focused on Judas Priest, focused on what Judas Priest is doing next, focused on what the Judas Priest lineup is. And I can understand the journalist asking that question, and they really were hoping for some quotes about the album. And he's just brilliantly said, "I haven't heard it." I mean, do we all think he hasn't heard it, or do we think he probably has heard it? But he clearly doesn't want to talk about it. And quite rightly, he does not want to give the oxygen of publicity to KK's Priest album. And I think that's admirable. Of course, he may not have heard it and he's just being honest. Either way, I think it's admirable. But let me tell you, this singer has heard KK's Priest album and it is fucking ridiculous. I'm sorry, hilarious. I mean, it sounds like somebody doing an impression of Judas Priest for a laugh. It is, to say it is cliched is to massively underestimate how cliched it is. I mean, you know, go and have a listen. Go on to YouTube, give it a listen. I'm genuinely thought it was, I don't know, it was almost funny, to the point, as I said earlier, of comedy. It's just insane. But it doesn't sound like a band that he spent 10 years putting together, because believe it or not, it's 10 years since he left Priest. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's right. I'm pretty sure it is. But, yeah, mad. And also, while we're talking about it, Richie Faulkner is recovering from his heart attack, and wish him all the best. Not that he'll ever know or ever hear this, but do you know what I mean? I'm sending my heartfelt best wishes, because, you know, it's a horrible thing to happen to anybody. Next up, The Three Tremors, featuring Tim Ripper Owens, yes, he of KK's Priest, Sean Peck and Harry Conklin, War of Nations music video. Now, I'm not, you know, three singers, they're doing this thing, The Three Tremors, great, giving absolutely no credit to anybody else who's on the album, as three singers might do. It's like, right, three singers on this album, and, who's in the band? Well, there's the three of us. Yeah, but who plays in the band? Well, there's three singers. There's him, there's me, and there's him. Yes, but who actually plays in the band? Well, we're the band. Yes, but all right, who plays drums? Who plays guitar? Who plays bass? Do you know what? I don't know. Not quite sure, actually. Have we got a band? Oi, Ripper. I mean, you know, do you call him Ripper? I mean, personally, if I knew somebody called Tim Owens, I would probably call him Tim, even if the nickname he chose himself is Ripper, and maybe he didn't choose it himself, but that's not really... it's not really a very complimentary nickname, is it? Ripper. I mean, it's a bit close to, you know, the R word with an A in it. Yeah, Ripper. Oi, Ripper. Come over here, sign this autograph. I don't know, it sounds like something from, like, you know, some BBC sort of period drama. There's a killer. Well, actually, and there used to be one called Ripper Street, didn't there? But it does, it's like, you know, oi, Ripper. Get your arse over here. Yeah, all right. What are we doing? We're doing some murder. Are we doing some murder? Yeah, we're doing some murder, because we're fucking cockneys in the 18th century. We're hacking up prostitutes for a laugh. We're gonna chop their heads off and put them on our own heads and walk round town like proper spivs. And anyway, it's just hilarious to me. Three singers, not a mention of anybody else in the band. Just these three singers and all the bands they used to be in, which I just think is fairly amusing. But there you go. Next up, Metallica's 40th anniversary is coming up, and we've got they've announced the San Francisco takeover. And among the events planned for the performances is Tappy Houston, the new band featuring Miles and Lane Ulrich, sons of Metallica drummer Lars Ulrich. Really? The surname kind of gave it away, but thanks, Blabbermouth, that they're Lars's sons. Great, okay. Ulrich, but no, cheers. Also, Otto, the three-piece band featuring Ty Trujillo, son of Metallica bassist Robert Trujillo. Again, never mind. And The Wedding Band, the side project of Metallica guitarist Kirk Hammett, bassist Rob Trujillo, and along with Ugly Kid Joe singer Whitfield Crane and Bad Wolves guitarist Doc Coyle. All I'm saying is, it's not exactly Jason and Mustaine playing with Metallica again and Merciful Fate and King Diamond playing, is it? You're getting to see the kids' bands. I don't know. I just think maybe, yeah, but there's all sorts of other events. And, I'm sure if you're a Metallica fan, you'll really enjoy them. Now, I can't decide about this next news story. I can't decide whether to slag it off or whether to give credit where credit's due. Okay? Here is the headline. Van Halen's lost singer, Mitch Malloy, celebrates Eddie Van Halen's musical legacy. Multi-camera video. Now, I saw that headline and I was like, what the fuck is this? Malloy told the story of his day at Eddie Van Halen's 5150 Studios to Melodic Rock, whoever that was, radio station, I think. A guy who worked for their management at the time used to be my road manager, and he kept calling me and telling me they were going to fire Sammy and that I was going to be the next singer in Van Halen. And he was calling, and finally I got annoyed about this, and I told him to stop, and that I didn't think I was a good fit in Van Halen, and that if he was serious, he should have Ed call me. I mean, really? You're fucking no one, and you're saying, I don't think I'd be a good fit for Van Halen? You get offered the job, you just fucking do it. Anyway, a week later, Desmond Child calls me and he says he has just left Ed's house and was writing with them, and they were talking about me, and they were watching my Anything at All video, and that he told them I was perfect for them, and that they'd be lucky to get me. Whatever. I don't know. And before I knew it, I was on the plane to LA. Ed did call a bunch of times. He was great. He then goes on to say that, according to Malloy, Eddie told him he was in the band on his third day in the studio. But when Eddie, Michael, Anthony and Alex Van Halen stepped on stage with their estranged singer Dave Lee Roth for the first time in 12 years at the 1996 MTV Music Awards, Mitch knew his dream gig had fallen apart. I'm sitting watching TV there by myself, and I'm saying, it wasn't good. I think literally my jaw dropped. So in that moment, I was shocked. And you know how sometimes as humans, we just know some things? You just know it. You don't have to say it. Nobody has to say anything. People just know things. And that moment that Roth walked out behind them, I knew it was over. I'm not going to be in Van Halen. I just knew somehow. And so that was it for me. It was just like, that's it. This can't happen now. I love that. I knew it was, I knew it was over. At that moment, Roth walked behind them. I knew it was over. People, sometimes you just know things. Yeah, I just knew somehow. The reason why you just knew somehow is because Dave Lee Roth is singing in Van Halen. That's how you just knew. I mean, you don't have to be a fucking psychic. You don't have to be clairvoyant. You just sat there going, yeah, right, okay, so that's me. I'm fucked. That's the end of me. Yeah. And so when I'm saying, like, I can't decide. I'm going to go, do you know what? I'm going to go with fair play to the guy. Right? Because basically, he was never in Van Halen, and if he was, it was for 3 days, and, does that really count? Does that really count? I mean, you've got the 3-second rule if you drop something on the floor, and, food on the floor, and you pick it up and eat it. Well, if you're me, you do. And fuck off, don't pull that face, don't make out like you haven't done it by yourself. Piss off. But, the 3-day rule in a band, yeah, no one goes around saying, yeah, I was in that band for 3 days, because it makes you look like a dick. But to be fair, it's all these years later, and he's going, do you know what? I am going to try and trade on this. And he's got himself on Blabbermouth. And there's 2 videos at the bottom of this, Mitch Malloy's Van Halen Experience Live. And there's 2 videos, one's Hot for Teacher, and it's Mitch Malloy's and Van Halen Experience, and I'm looking at it and I'm just thinking, do you know what? Fair enough. You've managed to get something out of this that you completely and totally don't deserve. And here's almost the proof. This is Mitch Malloy's last tweet, because his Twitter account is on the bottom with something he tweeted, and you can click and it says tweet your reply. So you click through, right? And his last tweet is Mitch Malloy's Van Halen experience jump live, and there's a link to him. And that tweet was posted as I speak 2 days ago, and it has one retweet and 5 likes. That is how relevant it is to the rock world. No one fucking cares. Nobody is queuing up to hear no one's queuing up to hear a guy who was in Van Halen for 3 days, his versions of the Van Halen back catalogue. There is no Van Halen fan out there going, oh, do you know what? I really want to hear this. I really want to hear the guy who wasn't in Van Halen. Oh, sorry, no, he was for 3 days. I really want to hear his interpretations of Van Halen's classic material, for fuck's sake. But you know what, Mitch Malloy? Fair play to you. I mean, it's clear from the reaction from Twitter and the lack of comments on Blabbermouth that no one gives a fuck. But fair play. Good on you. You've put yourself out there, haven't you? Fair play. And the other person who's put himself out there is Kid Rock. Now, do you know what? I was going to read you some of the lyrics from his fucking stupid new song called Don't Tell Me How to Live. And just read it. I don't want to give him any publicity because it's just the lyrics are just fucking dog shit. They really are. And look, the article's there. I'll put a link to it and you can read his lyrics, and it is just utter childish fucking drivel. It really is. Just an angry old man being angry, shouting at the internet and writing songs about shouting at the internet and writing songs about how the internet's not fair and young people and don't like him and get offended. It's just fuck off. You're called Kid Rock. You should be called Old Bastard Rock. You should be called Grandad Rock, because you're fucking out of date. Go back to just barbecuing. Yeah? Just go back to driving around in a pickup truck and barbecuing, you stupid fucking prick. Anyway. Dear, that feels better. So, what you've got coming up now is Bill Steer from Carcass. As you're going to hear, and no surprise here, I'll be doing my albums of the year. A first episode of next year, as I always do. But Torn Arteries by Carcass is my favourite album of the year. So Bill is the guitarist that is responsible for that album. 25% of the band, nay, 30% of the band. Anyway, we had a right old chat, and there was a good chunk of Patreon questions. Patrons really stepped up and came up with some brilliant questions. It's so good that I've left them in. Okay, so what you've got coming up now is not only the main interview, you've got all the Patreon, well, not all of the Patreon stuff, but you've got a big chunk of all the Patreon questions. The patrons, they get extra podcast as well, so they've got some more stuff with Bill that's not on here. But I really wanted to keep it in here because they, like I said, they really stepped up. Some great questions, as Bill says, you know. So, without further ado, here is Bill and I having a chat just the other week.
Hello.
Hello, sir.
How are you?
I am very well. How are you?
Yeah, doing all right, thank you.
Excellent, excellent. So, yet another interview. Are you all worked out of this album yet?
Yeah, it seems to be tapering off. I'd say we're about, well, speaking for myself, I'm probably 80 plus interviews deep into this. So, yeah, I'm imagining the end's in sight.
Yeah, that's a lot of interviews. That is a lot of interviews.
Yeah, it's, well, I mean, I'm sure you know this all too well yourself. Everything's shifted that way. I mean, you know, like in the 80s or 90s, you'd do a handful of interviews and that would cover an album. You know, it was all done. Yeah.
Well, it is. It's almost like now. Well, basically, distribution is kind of irrelevant, and it's more just making sure people know that it's out. Because if they know, they can get hold of it.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it is pretty much that simple now. Well, it seems to be, yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, I've toyed with setting up a record label and just, signing a distribution deal and doing your own PR and everything else, but then you look into it and then you just think, nah, this is too much like hard work.
Yeah, I mean, it's not for everybody, I reckon, because, I mean, yeah, it would be such a grind to take care of some of those things.
Yes.
But I mean, that side of labels is definitely, it's different now, because as you sort of mentioned there, the thing in the past was, well, we want to get signed so we can get into shops, but obviously not a huge amount of people buy records in shops now, so,
Yeah, well, and there's not a lot of record shops around either. So yeah. Other than that, it's hardly changed.
Yeah, exactly. It's all good.
Yeah. So look, I want to go back a little bit. Do you know what? I don't think we've ever met, but we were. I've been on your tour bus.
Okay.
Yeah, which sounds a bit creepy. It was when Stilly was working with you guys, I think.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, he was with us for a long time, and I definitely met some of the guys from Acid Rain, but like you said, I don't think we met for whatever reason.
Yeah, no, I think around that time, Cathedral were probably kind of like in their pomp as well, and I was off doing all sorts of bits and pieces. So, I mean, and Stilly says hi, by the way.
Oh, cool, great. Where is he now?
He lives in Germany.
Oh yeah, I did hear this a while. I wasn't sure if he was still there or what, but yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's face it, the pandemic's changed quite a few things.
Yeah.
But it's. So anyway, look, my point, the point was where I was wandering off on this was that you were touring with Body Count at the time.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And it just, to me, it just seemed, even at the time, it seemed like one of those typically absolutely insane record company ideas that you get forced into. I was just keen for my my own curiosity as to how it worked out.
Goodness, yeah, it was an odd match for sure. I mean, as far as I can recall, it was something that most of the band wanted to do.
Right.
I think especially Ken, our drummer, because he was a massive Ice-T fan.
Right.
So that was one element. I mean, he wasn't necessarily a Body Count fan, but I think he just liked the idea of being on tour with Ice-T in some form,
Yeah.
And then, there was all that, that kind of naive nonsense about reaching a new audience, which wasn't really going to happen.
Yeah.
But it was fun to do. It's just different, Everything about that tour was different, but, we got treated reasonably well. Nobody got harmed in any way. I think someone threw a bottle at us. We're leaving the venue after sound check, and there's a queue of people to get in, and someone threw a bottle at me and Ken. I was like, God, at least they know who we are.
That's amazing, getting bottled off before you've gone on.
I know, yeah, exactly.
Brilliant. And what made you want to come back after all this? I do realise I'm going a little bit into the past, and we are without doubt going to talk about the new album, because let's get this out of the way. It's going to be my album of the year.
Cool.
But what made you want to come back to the business, and certainly the way the business is now? Or was it just? It must have been the pull for playing live and just creating new music must have kind of overwhelmed the fact that you're coming back to this business, which is in such a state these days.
Yeah, but also I think I was very slow on the uptake. The other guys were very plugged into what was happening, in the present day. Obviously, when we first came back, it was the reunion phase, and we were just playing festivals, doing old material.
Yeah.
And that was with the Arch Enemy guys, Michael Amott, Daniel Lanson. And that was cool, but, there was a limited lifespan for that, because they had no interest in making new Carcass music. And that's fair enough, because, they had good reason to feel that way. Their primary loyalty was to Arch Enemy.
Yeah.
So if Carcass went down that road, it was going to cause a lot of trouble for them. So anyway, later on, they went off and did their thing, and Jeff and I kind of decided we'd like to make an album. So that's when we got Dan Wilding on board. But yeah, I didn't know as much as those guys about how much things had changed. And I was very much the last person to get on board with any kind of reunion. I mean, I was very resistant to it for a number of years. But then once we did start playing, I realized how much I'd missed it. And I also felt like, well, in for a penny, in for a pound. I mean, it felt a little bit kind of shabby to just come out and play old material. Yeah. And that's it. So it was always on my agenda privately, but I guess, you know, I just had to be patient and wait for an opportunity.
Yeah, I feel very similar about, you know, bringing Acid Rain back in 2015. It is that, you know, very, very sort of reticent to do so, but also I always felt, look, you can't come back and just keep rearranging the same old songs in a different order. You know, that's... Yeah,
I mean, yeah, exactly. I would agree with that. I mean, I guess there's probably people out there who are doing exactly that, you know, but, and it's probably fine to a degree. But I just think it's nice to feel like you're moving forward in some way and that you've got something new to bring to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And hey, if that works for some people, that's great and that's fine. You know, that it is what it is. But for me, I just kind of felt that you know, ultimately you come back and everyone goes, yay, you know, oh great, and they see you and they go, oh, it's great to hear these songs again. Great, yeah. When's the new album coming out?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I you know, we started getting that immediately. Well, so when... Yeah,
well, that's a good sign. In other words, yes. There's an interest in that, you know. I mean, you'd be worried if people didn't ask the question, I guess.
Unless you're me, and every time somebody asked me if it's a new album coming out, it just wound me up because it was like so far off in the distance. I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake. I see. Oh, yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, let's play the bloody gigs first.
Okay, that's fair enough. Yeah, when someone's like, you know, really premature with it, yeah, I get that.
Yeah. But we came back with a new single, so that kind of put that idea in people's heads. But I mean, that feeling of coming back and playing that material again, I'm really familiar with that, and that feeling of just coming off stage and going, wow, I haven't done that for a while, and yeah, I missed it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, with any of the more extreme forms of heavy metal music, playing it requires stamina. I mean, not just for the drummer, for everybody involved, you know, from bass player through to vocalist. So yeah, it's a little bit like a musical assault course. And if you manage to get through it relatively unscathed, you feel quite good afterwards, you know?
Yeah.
And it's nice to challenge yourself, you know. Obviously, the older you get, it's just a natural tendency to take things slower. And there's good sides and bad sides to that. But one of the bad sides would be sometimes you just don't push yourself hard enough or far enough.
Yeah. And that's interesting you say that. I mean, from that point, is that something you felt you've done in the past?
Oh, you mean in terms of kind of easing off a bit, relaxing?
And just kind of maybe not pushing hard enough.
Oh yeah, I mean, I did it in a purely musical sense because, you know, for years I was doing stuff like Firebird, and I mean that was pushing me in a different direction because, you know, there was a challenge to do that kind of music when I didn't quite have that kind of background. Yeah. I mean, I did as a listener, but I mean, I just hadn't played in a band of that nature before, so that was a learning experience. But after a certain time, that becomes your new comfort zone. And suddenly getting back into playing, well, what you might call death metal or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. Suddenly that became the new challenge again. Because, I could remember the riffs, but, you know, really nailing something, getting the feel, and, you know, it's properly in the pocket. Yeah. That took quite some time for me to get there. And unfortunately, quite a lot of gigs. So the early set of gigs for me would have been so bad.
Well, I know what you mean. I mean, especially I think and you know, let's dispose with genre names and let's just call it metal. But you know, what we're all playing is very much a case of it has got to be on point. Like you say about, you know, it's got to be in the pocket. You've got to be focused and you've got to be absolutely bang on. Yeah. Because otherwise it doesn't work. You know, you want people saying to you afterwards, "Fucking hell, that was tight as fuck."
Yep.
You know, and not just the crew. You want everyone to fucking notice. You know. And yeah, it is an assault course without a doubt. I mean, there's an incredible amount of energy needed from absolutely everybody, and you can't all be on it every night as well. You know, there's always nights where some people are gonna carry others.
Yeah, completely. You know, I think for most of us, there's no such thing as the perfect gig. There's always going to be a moment where I really fluffed that bit, but it's more you bounce back from that mistake or whatever, and then, you know, ideally at the end of the night you feel like it was good. You know,
yes.
There was more good than bad. I guess that's what you're aiming for. You just want to get your percentages up or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love a fly on the wall microphone in most dressing rooms up and down the UK, and the first thing you will get is a band going in the dressing room, and the first thing they're going to start talking about is, "Fucking hell, could you hear me today? Could you hear me?" You know, and it'd be like, "Oh, fucking, what happened there?" And it's like, you know, artists, there's something about you, like, you all come in and it's unstoppable. You instantly focus on the errors and what went wrong.
Oh yeah. Yeah, but again, that's healthy, surely. Cause,
yes, yeah.
You know, I mean, I've never seen a band, or been in a band anyway, that's coming off the stage and that someone goes in, "Oh God, we nailed that." You know,
yeah.
That would just be plain weird to witness.
Yeah, it would. It's like sometimes, it's weird though, because it goes so many different ways, because you can have people coming up to you telling you how great it was, and you can think, it really wasn't. But then after a while, when so many people are telling you it was, you start to think, well, hang on, is it me? You know, maybe it was that good. Yeah,
I mean, because of course, like all the kind of musical endeavors, you know, recordings especially, but it goes for gigs too. It's like you're putting something out there and you can't control how it's perceived. So sometimes what feels like a stinker of a gig is something that's quite memorable for some of the people that are there, you know.
You've just described our Bloodstock appearance this year. Absolutely spot on.
Oh really? That sounds interesting. So it felt like it was crap, and then people were raving afterwards. Or?
Well, we weren't even able to play a song for about 5 minutes because one of our guitarists, Paul, his rig went down.
Oh God, yeah.
And so I literally did like 5 minutes of stand up with the crowd.
Great.
And then instead of like emceeing a comedy club with 200 people in it, it's like it's a field with 15,000 people in it. But the principle's the same, you know. And so we kind of treaded water for 5 minutes there, and then we kind of got him back, but it was a real sort of cobbled together job. And so we didn't really hit our straps until, like, you know, 4 or 5 songs in, and, you know, we only got to play in a 45-minute set. But for people watching it, it was memorable because it looked like everything was going to go to shit, and it kind of finished climactically, and everybody remembers that. Do you know what I mean? Everybody takes away that, you know, that feeling at the end, whereas when you're on stage, you walk off and you take away the feeling that, for fuck's sake, you know, that could have been so much better.
Yeah, but sometimes those are the most memorable gigs, especially, I mean, I'm saying this more as an audience member, really. You know, if I look back on, you know, bands I'm into and stuff, and sometimes the most memorable gigs are ones where something went wrong. I mean, I've seen UFO a number of times, but maybe the most memorable one was, I don't know, a few years back in London. The guitar rig went down immediately, first song. You know, they'd started off with lights out, and then within seconds, the guitar rig just went kaput. And, you know, it's a packed house. There's like, a couple of thousand people or more. And, that was just awkward. And eventually, after lots of scurrying around, and you could just see the stress on that stage, but they got the stuff working again. And they just decided to stop from the beginning, and then they counted off the song and did it all again. And it just went down a storm. I mean, you know, it broke all the rules. You know, normally that would just, you know, you can't recover from that gig. But, I mean, it just seemed to make it more special somehow.
Yeah, I genuinely think you're right. I think you're right. And you know, a lot of people telling me that on the day, and, like, you know, the more distance you get from it, you kind of go, yeah, do you know what? That wasn't really anywhere near as bad as you remember it. But anyway, look, let's move on to the new album, which, as I've said, is just absolutely astounding. Just a phenomenal piece of work.
Oh, nice, thank you.
Are you still? By the way, I'm, and also there's no prize for this because I haven't done it before. But riff of the year is the intro to "In God We Trust." That is just riff of the year. That opening riff is just, mate, it is fucking fantastic.
Nice, thank you.
A pleasure. In fact, it's such a pleasure that last week I had my 85-year-old mum staying for a few days.
Yeah.
And I played a bits of your album, and I played that riff, and she was sat on the sofa, rocking backwards and forwards, saying, "That is lovely."
Wow.
So, high praise indeed.
That really is. I mean, that means a lot, actually. Thank you.
Yeah.
So are you talking about the very slow riff that kicks the whole thing off?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'm more than happy to start humming it, but I don't think the listeners have. I've done that once too often, but yeah. Honestly, man, there's just what a groove, and they're all over that. They're all over the album. A friend of mine said to me the other day that he said there's so much on it. There's so much music on it, and and it just doesn't feel like there's anyone out there doing anything like this. Does that, would you agree with that? It's kind of hard to be objective like that about your own music, I guess.
Well, yeah, it definitely is. And the other thing is, if you're not keeping up very well with a lot of the contemporary metal music, as I'm not, it's hard to make comparisons.
Yeah.
So somebody like Jeff or Dan, they'd be better placed to sort of say what they think about it. I mean, we probably have a slightly different approach in the sense that, it's a very old band, or at least Jeff and I are very old. So you've got,
yeah.
A very ancient pool of influences, I guess, that you draw from. And it's never going to be one of those bands where you try and keep up with, current trends. I don't know. I don't want to think of any examples right now, but there have been bands and artists who've done that and kind of made fools of themselves a bit. So I think with style, it's just about as much to do with what you don't do as what you do. So yeah, I don't know. Like you said, there is actually a lot of music on this album, considering it's not that long, really. But that's just because it was so many years in the making, really. There was a bunch of material that Dan and I worked on years back, and then we suddenly discovered there was more touring planned, like another 2 years out there. So all that stuff went into cold storage. And then when Jeff was like, okay, I'm ready now, and he sort of tapered off the live work a bit. Three of us really got to work then, because it wasn't a reality until Jeff was involved. So we had all the old stuff from a couple of years back, and then we had more stuff that had come up in the meantime. So we just did what we normally do, really crafted the arrangements, bickered about how to finish songs and stuff, and it's just always fun. It's like it's the way we've always worked, I guess.
Yeah, and it's great to hear as well. There is without doubt there's times where you kind of slip into kind of classic metal, really. I mean, and I just really kind of admired that, because it's not like you're coming out and saying, right, okay, we started all this, and this is our sound, and you've always been a band who's developed and tried to build on the last outing, and this does it again, which I was really surprised about, because I mean I loved the comeback as well, but this just seems like you've kind of taken on the mantle of, do you know what, we can do anything, because we are who we are, and we've earned the right.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting way of looking at it. I mean, I guess there could have been some of that going on somewhere in the back of somebody's mind, but I think there was an unspoken kind of understanding between the three of us when we were working on this stuff that it was going to be a substantially different album from Surgical Steel. It would need to be, because in between the two records, you've got at least 5 years of touring and loads of festivals.
Yeah.
So we hadn't played a single gig with Dan prior to making Surgical Steel. So you're hearing the energy and excitement of this new lineup, but it's a little bit frantic. With this one, I don't know, it just feels like everyone's playing together more, and there's something else happening musically where, maybe not trying as hard. It's more just letting the music flow. There's definitely some crazy stuff on this record, that I would consider extreme anyway. But as you pointed out, I mean, I don't know, we're just being honest about where our influences are and, what we feel about metal music. I mean, there are going to be some purists who are a bit younger who obviously wouldn't really approve of that, They kind of want this music to kind of exist in isolation. But I don't feel that way about any form of music. It's all connected in some way.
Yeah, absolutely, and it all represents. All music is of its time.
Yeah.
So you can't have an album that sounds like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, because it's just not happening.
Oh yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, to be fair, it hasn't happened very often, but on those rare occasions where somebody's piped up with, I was hoping you'd do an album like, your second album.
Yeah, and I just think that people also personalise music. So despite the fact that it's written by you, it's their music, and they want you to write what they want.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, we've all made that mistake at some point. I mean, I definitely did when I was younger. You'd be sort of slagging some band off or whatever, it's not the album they should have made. I wouldn't say that now just because I've been in that position of having people do that to me, It's just how it is. I mean, I think if people are actually being honest, the thing to say would be, I don't like the direction they've taken. It's not the album I wanted. But naturally, there's a lot of this where people go to another setting.
And that is what it is, isn't it? It's being let down personally.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I guess when you look at it that way, there's some kind of weird narcissism going on in that. And especially with metal having so much going on, there are just so many bands, especially in the extreme area. So it's almost like, there is if you want really extreme music, there's a lot of bands doing that. And, Carcass hasn't really ploughed that furrow since we were very, very young and very early on into our quote-unquote career.
Yeah, but you're always that band to some people, aren't you? It's like, so no matter how many years go past, you are the band that put that album out, and that is the album I want.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, you can't get away from that stuff. It's just how it is, I guess. And sometimes you'll meet people and it's all about the fifth album. I mean, over the years, Swan Song has sort of developed some kind of following, and you will meet people that, for them, that's the peak of the band's creativity. And then there's the other people who are like, that's the worst thing you ever did. Please don't ever do it again.
Yeah. Who'd be in a band, eh?
Well, you've got to develop a thick skin, which...
But you have to. You have to develop it, otherwise you're lost.
Yeah, completely. If you do a lot of gigs, there will be sort of weird things that happen. Sometimes you're playing and the song stops and there's a stranger in the front of the audience yelling abuse at you or threats or whatever, and you're like, wow, this is weird. I just came here to play some riffs.
Yeah, but as we all know, people can take their music very, very seriously.
Yeah. I mean, it gets all wrapped up in identity.
But I mean, that's a whole other subject in itself, really, isn't it? Because sometimes you get the feeling there's a bit of posturing going on, like, you're trying to pull off this image. It's like, I'm the guy that only listens to this. And as time's gone on, I've started to wonder if that is really possible. Mm-hmm. I'm sure it is when you're 16, because I only listened to really super noisy music when I was 16 or so. But by the time I was, say, 23, that was just not reality at all. I mean, you start to think, what's the shame in admitting I like this piece of music that isn't, that doesn't fit the identity?
Yeah, Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's called, it's called maturing, isn't it? It's called growing up. And funnily enough, when you were talking there, I was thinking, I think it's linked to some people's enjoyment of music is linked to their self-esteem as well. And so literally, if they get something that they didn't like, they didn't want, or something like that, it is an emotional, visceral reaction because they feel like they have been betrayed. Yeah.
And then there's another kind of set of people where it's kind of that, but really it's a bit of a performance that's played out on social media.
Yes.
Hello everyone, check me out. I'm really pissed off about this, and that says a lot about me because I'm kind of an extreme guy,
Yes.
So, I mean, like, if someone's honestly, for example, with our band, if someone's honestly saying they're surprised that this new album doesn't sound like Weaker Pigeon, there's an element of posturing going on for sure. I mean, nobody could be that naive if they know anything about the band to expect us to play music that's just like that in 2021,
Yeah, well, also they've got a whole album in Surgical Steel, which is a little bit of a clue as to how this album was going to sound.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's a pointer at the very least.
Yeah, and but it's funny as well that I think that happens to bands also. The self-esteem wrapped up in the band issue, and then putting an album out that doesn't go down well, and all of a sudden you've got a band full of depressed musicians who have invested too much of their own psyche in the album. Yeah, definitely.
I never used to understand that thing when you'd read an interview with somebody and they were saying, you know what, I don't really read reviews anymore. And I think I'll always read reviews, because I care about what people think. I do still care, but I hardly ever read reviews now. Because I think first and foremost, you've got to be fairly sure about where you stand with what you've created. So, if you can stand behind your album, then, you don't mind taking some criticism. You'd much rather get good reviews, sure, but it's not going to ruin your day if you see a bad one.
Yeah.
I think another reason why I wasn't as keen to read some of this stuff was because doing as many interviews as I have, and I think Dan's done quite a few and Jeff's done a handful, sometimes you get the feeling that some of these guys, they're really snowed under with music, and you can just feel it off them.
Yeah.
Listening to an album all the way through without any breaks is it's just inconceivable.
Yeah.
So there's a good chance it's going to be a kind of a reflex reaction. Like, they might be doing a washing up or whatever it is at home. They've got the album on. And if it just doesn't immediately hit them as the thing they wanted from this group, or if they didn't like the group in the first place or whatever, of course it's going to be a negative review.
Yeah, and I think that is extended to the listening public as well. I think now people will say, "Oh, what do you think to the new Exodus single?" It's like, "Oh, I only got halfway through it," and you're like, "Eh?"
Yeah, that's mad, isn't it?
That's
really crazy.
It's like, and the thing is, we've all heard it. We've all heard people saying that kind of thing. And it's just it's a real shift of right. Yeah, you've got 2 minutes, or I'm moving on. Yeah. I mean, yep. Sure. I mean, a lot of these, when you go down this road with this type of conversation, it's always going to come back to like how much things have changed. Attention spans have been shredded. Yes.
Ever since the internet kicked off. And that goes for every one of us. Even middle-aged folk like me or Jeff, it will have affected us to some degree.
Same here. Yeah, absolutely.
So, and it's just one of those things. I mean, it's kind of a shame, but this is where we're at the moment. And you just got to be optimistic and hope, some good will come out of it in some way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, sorry. Looking at the album that I've got the CD, just the regular CD of it. The attention to detail that's gone into the art, into the whole package. As an old schooler, I really, really appreciate that, and I love the plate and knife and fork set of the whole. That is just, that's typical Carcass, a real sense of humour. It must be, I don't know how to say this, but none of that shit's cheap. I don't think people realise what an investment that is.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? It's like,
Yep.
you fight developing the concepts and all of those, various hearts and you like everything. That is a quite an undertaking, almost as much as, the album itself.
Yeah. I mean, I was blissfully unaware of most of this, and I'm sure Dan was. I mean, I think it was mostly Jeff engaging with his artist friend over in Poland,
right.
The man whose name I still cannot pronounce, unfortunately.
Great.
So I really don't know how long they kind of liaised on this whole thing for, but I'm guessing it was a long time.
Yeah.
And then the promo kind of related things with the label, same thing. I don't know who made which decision, but it seems to be getting some attention. I mean, the plate thing in particular.
Yeah.
But I knew nothing of this until one of the earliest interviews that I was doing, and someone mentioned it. I was like, really?
Really? So you didn't know about the plate set?
Absolutely had no idea. Yeah.
That's awesome. So your fans are out there pre-ordering it, 8 weeks before it's due to come out, and you don't even know that it exists until you start doing interviews.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's probably my fault, because I'm really sluggish with replying to emails, so it could easily be something I missed that way. But yeah, I mean, essentially that's Jeff's world, really. It's his domain. He does all the kind of, there's obviously the lyrics too, but the visual side of the band, that's very much his bag.
Well, I was going to say, is there a clear demarcation point? Is there stuff where you look at and you go, right, no, that's for Jeff, and Jeff will look at stuff and you go, right, no, that's Bill's area.
Yeah, I guess there is. I mean, it's never spoken of, but it's just drifted that way over the years. So yeah, he does all the lyrics, all the visuals. He also manages the band, which I guess some people probably already know. He does the social media type stuff.
Right.
Although I think Dan maybe does our Instagram, but Jeff does the Facebook and whatever. Yeah, and then when as far as the musical direction, I guess I bring in the raw material, like all the riffs and stuff. But that would be just the beginning of a lengthy process, because a lot of those things just go through the mincer when I take them into the rehearsal room. They get critiqued very heavily by the guys.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's quite an undertaking, but it certainly seems that, like you say, you've got sort of clear areas of what's best to do and how best to play it out between the two of you. When that sort of extra 2 years of touring was thrown in front of you on the surgical steel dates, that could have been something that that could have been something you didn't really want to do. Does it? Because you were quite a few years in, and then all of a sudden finding out there might be another 2 years of this. That must have been something to take on board.
Yeah, it was. I mean, if I remember correctly, it didn't get rolled out exactly like that. Like, you've got 2 more years ahead. But it was like at the start of a new year, when Dad and I were sort of thinking, right, we're going to get really stuck into this new stuff. That's when it was clear that Jeff did not feel that way whatsoever, and there were a lot of dates coming through. So, you just kind of had to be philosophical, because, I mean, neither of us have, as in Dan and myself, neither of us have what it takes to manage a band. We don't have that kind of vision, and we don't have that kind of inclination either. But that is very much a natural thing for Jeff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, in some senses, when you accept that somebody's the leader or even the manager, you're putting some faith in their vision. Yeah. And there'll be times when you don't agree. So, yeah, I mean, that year went by, and then there was another year. And I think that at that point, it really felt like, because we might have done 6 American tours or something. I'm trying to think.
Wow, right, okay.
But yeah, it did feel like, how much more can there be now,
Yeah.
So there probably was a little bit of frustration there, but you also knew there's no way this is going to work by trying to drag your frontman into the studio when he's not ready.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Because he's got his management hats on. He's very aware of what he's trying to achieve with this stuff. And I can get it. It's very hard to switch in the middle of that and go, all right, I'm being creative now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he was kind of vindicated in the long run because this album wouldn't have been as good if we had tackled it 2 or 3 years earlier.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's, I guess the material's matured quite nicely because of this.
Well, it works out in the end, and the thing is, I think I read an interview with Jeff at the time, and I remember him saying something that sort of rang true with me as well, where he was like, no, we're not going. No, we haven't started writing a new record. No, we're not going to be back in the studio in the next 12 months. We're going to tour the fucking arse off this first. Because we've got to squeeze every single last drop of, out of every single thing we do, because that's the way the business is now. And I remember thinking, yep.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's refreshingly honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't really argue with that. That is kind of where things are at, especially for a band at our level, where we've done okay, but we're not, not exactly affluent, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We've been fortunate enough to make a living off this for the last few years, but we have to work. So, yeah, I think he put that across quite well. I mean...
No, I do. I do. And I think also, as you said, you can't knock honesty. Do you know what I mean? You just can't knock it. If someone's being honest, you can disagree, you can not like what they're saying, but you're always going to have to come back to at least they're being honest. Yeah,
I mean, in a way, I was hoping he would do more of these interviews just because he is an excellent interviewee. It's so rare now because a lot of us just end up playing the political game where, I can't really say that. You're self-censoring all the time.
Yeah.
And he doesn't tend to do that. So, yeah, I mean, sometimes he'll say things that, like, a lot of us would be kind of, like, a little bit bent out of shape by or whatever, but it does make for a really good interview where somebody's not playing that game,
yeah,
the showbiz game, the political stuff.
You do realise now that people are listening in to you and I chatting, and they're thinking, bloody hell, I wish this was Jeff.
No, I mean, quite rightly. I mean, I've definitely had that where you're talking to someone on the phone and you can kind of tell they were hoping they'd get to speak to Jeff, because there's always something spicy in his interviews.
Right.
But I think he's just jaded at the whole thing to the point where he did a handful of the ones that he wanted to do and then left the rest to Dan and myself, which we were fine with because, I mean, we don't have the responsibilities that Jeff has. For the most part, we just turn up to places and play our instrument, whereas he's always got all this other stuff on his mind. It's pretty much a 24-hour thing with him, really.
Yeah, I know the feeling. I know the feeling of walking around and handing out, giving everybody their buyout and their PDs, and then going off and doing your sound check.
Yeah, yeah. Oh God. I mean, yeah. It's not for everybody. Some people just like having an element of control and like organizational things. But I think a lot of people in the music world, like myself, just recoil from any of that.
Yeah. It's just like, look, just tell me where I need to be and at what time, and and ideally that's it. Yeah, no, I know the feeling. I really do. But so obviously you're going to be. Well, hopefully you're going to be touring this album. What are dates looking like, and are things just constantly changing?
Yeah, I'm trying not to get too carried away with the things that are lined up because we just don't know realistically if they'll come off. But the last I heard, the tour that was lined up, oh goodness, I guess it was for this autumn. It was going to be Behemoth, Arch Enemy, ourselves, and another group across Europe. Obviously that got pulled, but I've been told that it's getting rescheduled for some point. I don't know, was it spring next year or something? I don't know exactly, but our drummer Dan seemed very confident that it's going to happen. And then the other surprise to me was learning that we might be touring with them on a Marth in America in around the same period. Just like finish one tour, have a few days off, and then off again.
Wow.
So, yeah, I mean, I'll believe it when I see it. You know.
Yeah.
We've got Damnation coming up, and you know, if that actually happens, that will be, you know, incredible. Really, it'd be just a very strange thing to play a gig after whatever it's been, like 2 years or something.
Yeah, you sound very much like me. It was like, you know, it's coming up to Bloodstock. It was like, yeah, whatever. You know, literally, I didn't believe it till about a fortnight beforehand. And even then, I was kind of like, there's still time for this to fall apart. And unfortunately, that is, you know, that's the world we live in now more than ever. I mean, we did our second set of dates as a 4-piece because we lost a guitarist to COVID. We had a bass player and guitarist both got COVID. Bass player was fine after 10 days. Guitarist was absolutely mullered.
Goodness me.
Yeah. So he was wiped out for about a month, 5 weeks. And all of a sudden, you start thinking as a 4-piece, shit, right. So if one of us goes down, we're done. So all of a sudden, you're like going, right, okay, so it is make sure you've got a Sharpie on you at all times. If somebody wants an autograph, you've got to use your own pen. Selfies are fine, but with a little bit of distance, no handshakes, all fist bumps, and all of a sudden your mind starts racing and you're like, right, okay. So, and it can actually be quite stressful.
Yeah, I mean, once it's kicked off in your mind, it's just churning away there, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and the thing is that, you know, then all of a sudden you're thinking, right, well, okay, the merch guy's on the bus as well, and the merch guy is going to be dealing with everybody.
Yeah.
So what do we do about him? How do we make him safe? How do we make us safe from him? You know, and it's just, it's a whole layer of kind of organisation and stuff that you know, that just never existed before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, fear or anxiety or whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's a very powerful thing. You know, it can really work away at you over a period of time.
Yeah, and it's just about being careful and being safe, and people are people are wanting to get to see shows, and for those people that you do play for, it will be a massive thing because you'll be one of the first bands that they've seen since the pandemic, and you know they'll remember these shows forever. These first few shows out of lockdown, people are going nuts for them, and I'm not surprised.
Yeah. I mean, I think people just really, you know, value live music more than ever.
Yeah.
You know, because it was taken away for so long.
Yeah, without a doubt. Now, one thing before we, I've got some listener questions for you,
cool.
Which will be a lot better than mine. But they always are. It pisses me off. As regards the making of the album, you put that. I mean, that's been painstakingly put together over a very long period of time. And I think I remember. Did you get Jens to master it?
Yes, I believe we did. I think that was always on the cards, you know, because of the connection with David Castillo and everything.
Oh mate, the job he does of mastering is incredible.
Yeah, it definitely seems that way. I mean, it's as you know yourself, there's an art form going on there.
Yeah.
And especially at a time when, you know, there's been crazy volume wars going on for so long.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are very satisfied with that. Like, you know, somebody's mastered our thing and they've smashed the life out of it. There's no dynamics left. Yeah. That's just how we want it.
Yeah, I know.
Whatsoever.
Yeah. It amazes me because it's like, no, do you know what? I want our record to sound fucking huge. I don't want it to sound loud. You can turn the fucking volume up.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, you know, everyone's got a volume control in their stereo.
Yeah.
But there is something very exhausting about listening to some of the more kind of modern masterings of records because it's like it just doesn't relent at all.
Yes.
Everything's as loud as everything else at all times.
Yeah. Vocals as loud as the drums. How the fuck does that work?
Yeah.
Yeah. I know what you mean by tiring. It like 2 or 3 songs in, you just fatigue.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, I found that with an album recently, but I mean, yeah, Jens's mastering job, for me, I mean, he did our album as well, and he just seems to find, it's almost otherworldly. He kind of finds some stuff that, you know, I didn't even know was there.
Sounds good.
But the album sounds great. You've got to be happy with how it sounds sonically.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I mean, David just understood. I don't think we really laboured the point with him. Really, he just got it. Like,
yeah.
We wanted something that was a bit warmer, fatter, more organic. I mean, the thing with Surgical was, the record was done, but then sort of the working situation with Colin Richardson sort of disintegrated. I mean, it wasn't acrimonious. It was just he'd had enough of working on the project and he'd been asked to do something else that he did want to do.
Yeah.
And we'd heard his rough mixes and we were very perplexed because it just was a million miles from how we heard this music. And then, really, Andy Sneap came in and saved us because, you can't force somebody to finish work on an album that they've lost interest in.
Yeah.
So Andy was totally up for it, and in a matter of days, he kind of rescued the thing, got some, very finished-sounding mixes together. So, yeah, we were delighted at the time, but on some level, we were also aware of the fact that it was a little bit more clinical than we would have wanted,
Yeah.
We just... This was us coming back after so many years, so we were never going to get exactly what we wanted out of the material or the recording the way we have done this time. So
by the sounds of it, it's almost in the album titles, isn't it? It's like Surgical Steel, which is a bit more surgical, a bit more clean, and Torn Arteries, more organic, and there is. I mean, it's. I mean, I'm not saying it's like super raw or anything, but it breathes a bit more, and I think you're just hearing more of the players, if you know what I mean. The separation. To quote somebody who was listening to it on our tour bus, the separation is the closest to perfection I've ever heard.
Wow, goodness.
Yeah,
that's high praise.
High praise indeed.
I mean, like I said, I can't say enough about David. He's fantastic, and obviously James Atkinson in Leeds tracked all the rhythm guitars, which was, as it always would be, was a lengthy process. So just being around people you just trust implicitly, that get the best out of you without really pushing you in any way. They just allow you to play the way you play.
Yeah.
It was just a very, very good experience from start to finish, really. And then, as you pointed out, with the master, that was just a huge relief that the thing came out sounding like that rather than just completely smashed the fuck.
Yeah. That it's got a richness to it. It's got a real organic kind of richness to it, which I absolutely love, and it sounds huge. And I'm all for let's all make records that sound huge, and then you can do what you like with the volume.
Yeah, completely. I mean, we could go on for hours about its dynamics.
Yes.
It's just simply, if the VU meter is constantly in the red, it's no longer powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just that's the new setting. It's no different from playing quiet music, and it just stays quiet all the time.
Yeah.
There's got to be some kind of push and pull going on with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but it's like, sometimes I'm listening to stuff and I'm thinking, these guys have never heard the phrase "less is more." It's literally like, God, everything is just piled up high. Well, look, Bill, I really appreciate your time. I've got a few subscriber questions. If you can hang on, you cool with that?
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Okay, right. So, this is from Paul Hutchings. Paul says, Torn Arteries was written over 3 years ago and recorded over 2 years ago. How do you keep that music fresh in your head, given it's now actually part of Carcass history rather than brand new? And is that whole situation a bit of a mindfuck?
Well, that's a big yes to the last part of the question, yeah.
Yeah.
But it was okay because we knew we weren't the only people in this situation. That we knew across the planet there are countless bands and artists who'd made recordings that they were forced to sit on. So, yeah, I mean, the way it worked for me personally was to just not listen to the album for a very long time, because I wanted it to be fresh again when the thing came out and I had to start doing interviews. And that worked a treat, to be honest, because much to my relief, I stuck the thing on and I still enjoyed the music. You're always going to be harsh on the things you do. So yeah, there'll be little moments where you're like, oh, I wish I hadn't done that, or I wish I had done that, or whatever it was. But for the most part, yeah, I still really like the record. It is definitely a retrospective release for us. But the cool thing is it's new to everybody else. So I guess that's how we're looking at it.
Yeah. And it's the only way you can look at it, isn't it? Because you just, it's got to try and stay fresh. Right. So the next question is from Mark Pensome, and he says, right, I'll go there. Who came up with the hand claps as an idea? And for what it's worth, I like them.
Phew, that's a relief. Yeah, I mean, you'll be surprised how many times it could come up in interviews, actually.
I can imagine. Yeah.
I mean, to me, I took that as always a good thing. Whether the interviewer was being snotty about this or being positive, it was a good thing because it indicated they'd listened that far into the album. So I was already happy, just to hear about that. But yeah, okay, Jeff needs to take the credit for this one. I think we were in a phase of doing lots of percussion on the record. I mean, we did all kinds of things. Some are more evident than others, and I gather the hand claps are quite prominent for most people's taste. But and there's triangle on one song.
I heard that. Yeah.
Oh, you did. Your ears are better than mine because me and Jeff, we just couldn't hear it, and then David and Dan were like, it's very loud, and it's we just lost the top end. It's just not there.
Yeah,
but I'm assured that the triangle is audible, which is nice.
It is there, mate. I promise. But yeah, I think, like you said, it's great, and also if you can't do things like this deep into your career, what's the fucking point? When are you supposed to do it?
Yeah, exactly, and I think you're always going to be walking some kind of tightrope where it's like you don't want to be too safe, but you don't take too many risks. But yeah. I think all you've got is your kind of your instinct.
Yeah.
What you think is cool and what works for your band.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned earlier on, there's lots of things stylistically that we just wouldn't do. It doesn't feel right for us. But yet we're doing things like that on the record. So. All you've got is a feeling, and when this one came up, we were like, yeah, let's do that. The same thing with all the stomping and stuff on the Ixtab. It was just a lot of fun to record, and it felt good for the track.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. You have to go. You've got to trust your instincts. You've got to say, look, that is a good idea. In isolation, it's a good idea. So let's just do it. Well, Mark has got another question, and he says, when you and Jeff decided to carry on and produce new music, did you want to contribute vocals again right from the outset, or is it something you were persuaded into?
Good question. I'd say it's a little of both. There was some persuasion necessary, but not a huge amount, because I'd been away from the band long enough to sort of reflect on the different eras of our music and what we would need to do live and stuff. And of course, if we're going to represent, say, the second album in the set in some way, there's going to be some of my vocals involved. So once I'd already got that far, it wasn't a huge leap to go on and say, okay, yeah, I don't mind doing some vocals on the album. When the time came on Surgical, I was, we hadn't played gigs for ages. And, we're just in the middle of the countryside in Derbyshire. I was just uncomfortable. So I had to go next door to the pub and get, a couple of jugs of beer filled up. And then we went back into the studio and I kind of dusted off the cobwebs a bit.
That sounds like one of those legendary sessions that people talk of, and it's just like, yeah, I'm not feeling this. Let's go to the pub.
Yeah, well, I mean, if in doubt, it seems to work for a lot of situations. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And why
but I think especially vocals, I think, because depending on your style, but like certainly in this area of music, you don't want the vocal to be too inhibited. There's got to be a lot of energy in it, and sometimes you don't want to go in there completely sozzled either. But something that loosens you up a bit is going to help to a degree.
Yeah. Well, certainly in this area, and like you said, depending on your style. Right, I've got a question from Alan Phillips. Alan said, did the reception of your comeback come as a surprise to you, as it appears to me that in your absence the number of fans appears to have multiplied? I saw you a few years back in Manchester with Napalm Death, Voivod and Obituary, and the crowd seemed as enthusiastic for your set as any others. So the question that starts that is, did the reception of your comeback come as a surprise?
Yeah, it did. Very much so. I think we were quietly confident that we'd made a valid record, but we also assumed that there would be a limited appeal. We figured that the really kind of hardcore Carcass people would be very up for this thing, and we assumed that elsewhere there wouldn't be a huge amount of interest.
Yeah.
Understandably, there was always going to be cynicism because, if you've been away from this for, I can't remember how many years it was, 17 or something, people will naturally expect that record to be a complete turkey. They're just going to, it's just the thing you would expect, like it's going to be really off stylistically. So when it wasn't, I think that drew in a few more people. And then there's also a sort of, almost a zeitgeist thing. I wish I could think of a different word for this, but, that's the only word I can think of right now. Where, there's sorry, that's my dog, Ronnie. There's a prevailing mood, like within, the journalist community or whatever. And it's been like, that record's quite good, actually. And sort of that softens up the next guy who's approaching this record to review it or whatever. So you can be lucky with things like that. Sometimes those aren't sincerely held opinions even. It's just somebody who's quite busy deciding to come out on your side rather than slag you off. Yeah. And to some extent we've had a little bit of the opposite this time around, but we always kind of anticipated that. You can't have an easy ride every time.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think anybody who's got any questions or queries about this album is just, they're really missing out. Because, I think it's the same with movie watching as well. It's about what you bring to a project is going to decide whether, how you feel about it. So, do you know what I mean?
No, that's very true. Yep. Yeah, exactly. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I don't get to hear that much contemporary music, especially in metal, but, there's a pub I go to in Soho quite often, and if I'm there on a lunchtime and it's kind of quiet, the bar manager lad, he's a big music fan, but he's more into things like contemporary country and stuff like that. So he plays me a lot of that stuff.
Right.
And it's interesting because I do like country music, but I'm more listening to the older guys and stuff. And at first, of course, I was resistant to it. Like, I'm not going to like this, but
yeah,
over time, he sort of did kind of win me over because, you just sit there and listen, and then you start to notice good things in the music. And you're like, oh, that's a great vocal, or actually, what a fantastic lyric, or I love how they handled the production values on this thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely about being open to something, because if you come at something with a whole bunch of prejudices, you're probably not even going to hear the music properly.
Yeah, that's a bit like me listening to Kiss. I just think, oh, fuck me, this is just shit, horrendous.
What do you mean, all Kiss, or just like?
I mean every song they've ever fucking written.
Oh wow.
Yeah, just not a fan at all. At all. But anyway, sorry. This is not about what I'm a fan of. So, next question. This is from Pete Gray. It's a bit of a cliche, but does the fact the band has a unique sound that is always identifiable as Carcass give you a bit more leeway to experiment?
I would really hope so, because I think that was where we were coming from on this record, particularly.
Yes.
Because Dan hasn't been in the band as long as Jeff or myself, but, you know, he's an inherently musical person. So, you know, his judgments with things like taste and whatever tend to be really good. And I think, especially when the pair of us started working on that early batch of tunes, we both just figured, well, this is going to sound like Carcass. So you don't have to get all self-conscious and like, should we listen back to whatever record it was from the past? And, you know, I mean, I don't think you should be, you know, self-plagiarizing.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, if you don't do it, sometimes people are disappointed. You know, they want more of that, you know, in the new music. But I just figured, I mean, this sounds very Carcassy to me. And I don't think we could have justified making a new album that wasn't actually new music. There's got to be something fresh that you're bringing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, for me, I think first couple of times I heard it, what really hit me was the fact that for me, it just sounded like a band really genuinely taking, like, you've established a comeback, and then you've kind of topped that with, like, I hate to say this, but an album that you've always wanted to make.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely feels that way. You know, the 21-year-old me would have loved to just attempt something like this, but, you know, I just wasn't there yet. You know, that was a different stage for the band. And I think maybe the reason why some people favour that third album over anything else we've done is because there's something very depraved about it. It's like a bunch of young blokes reaching for something, like it's slightly beyond our grasp, you know, as technically as musicians.
Yeah.
But we're just trying very hard, and it's come out in a very twisted way.
Right. Yeah. And your enthusiasm has got to be admired, but it's fallen just that a little bit short.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what I mean. I'm very fond of that record, and it does have a vibe. It's kind of, you know, irreplaceable. You know, I mean, you can't go back to that. But I'm also aware of some of that in the music. I mean, I can hear it, I can feel it, because I remember how it felt at the time. You know, you just trying to play a little bit beyond your abilities.
Right. Yeah. Well, certainly none of that going on. None of that. Right. Johnny Sars has got 3 quick fire, nice and simple questions. First up, favourite riff you've ever written?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Good luck with that, Bill.
Bloody hell. Wow. I mean, I'm not going to cop out and not give an answer, so I'll just go with the first thing that came to mind. So, No Love Lost. Cool.
Okay. Personally, opening riff to In God We Trust, but there you go.
Well, the thing is, I mean, if I'd paused, it would have been something on the new record for sure. Just because that's a little bit more representative of where we're at and I'm at the moment.
Yes.
But yeah, just from the original run of records, something like that would be the first thing that pops up.
Cool. Next from Johnny, most rock and roll thing you've ever done?
Whew, that's difficult. But yeah, I mean, this is one of those things, you know, like, not to get too pedantic about it, but I've noticed that over the years, the term rock and roll is used for types of behaviour and attitude rather than music.
Yes.
You know, for me, it's like, let's not forget that it was originally a style of music. So, I mean, yeah, the whole, some of those things that do come up a bit in the life, you know, like whether it's, you know, drinking or, you know, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
They're real things for a lot of people in bands, but I mean, is that really the essence of rock and roll? I mean, I'm not sure it is. It's perfectly possible to be a good rock and roll musician or a metal player and be completely straight, responsible human being.
Yes.
I'm not saying anyone in our band is, well, apart from Dan for sure. He definitely is. But, so I guess I've dodged that question, really, haven't I? It's not a very good answer.
I think you've given it. I think you've done an answer that Jeff would have been proud of.
I doubt it.
Right, and I've got two for you now that are going way back into the deep, dark, distant past. Last two questions. This one is, this is from Johnny again, and it says, how did you feel when the BBC Arena documentary aired?
That's brilliant. That's going deep.
Yeah.
Embarrassed would be the primary emotion, I would say. I don't think anybody involved in the band was delighted with that.
Yeah.
But we were naive as hell, so we walked into that situation.
Yeah.
You're always going to get stitched up to some degree.
Yeah.
And I think the person, I've not seen it for many years, but from what I recall, the person that made the documentary wasn't a fan of heavy metal music whatsoever.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit unbalanced because, really, napalm was a thing at the time. It was happening. But in terms of stature, it's not exactly a Sabbath or a Priest. So I felt like that was really off balance. It was really off kilter.
Yeah.
When that whole Red Dwarf thing came up, Jeff was like really keen to do it, and I was like, oh God, I've already made a fool of myself on television. I don't want to do it again.
Yeah.
But luckily he taught me round. It was a good thing to do, doing that, because that was what we were there for specifically, was to behave like prats. We got paid handsomely for it.
Yeah. Well, look, that's the main thing, isn't it? Back then.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. It was great. Even now we still get the odd little royalty off that show. It's bonkers. I've never even watched it.
Brilliant. Yeah. Well, look, going back maybe nearly as far. This is last question from Cam Valance, and it says, Did you think Scum, the actual song, was any good?
Yes. I was a fan of the band for some time before I got asked to join, and I used to walk around with some kind of really primitive Walkman type thing, listening to that demo that became Side A of Scum. I've not gone back and listened to the record for ages, like many, many years. But if you're asking the 16, 17-year-old me, yeah, God, I thought it was brilliant. I wonder why is he implying that it's not good? I don't know. That's an interesting question.
No, I don't think there's any implication there. I think it is genuinely just wanting to find out what you think.
Yeah, I'd love to know for younger people quite what that record sounds like, because I can remember what it sounded like at the time, and that Side A demo thing, it was just, for a bunch of us, it was just the most exciting thing happening in the UK at that time. I was very lucky to later become involved in the band, but there's a few of us who were just big fans. We just thought napalm was great.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, actually, did you play in them? I saw napalm supported by Holy Terror and DRI at the Nottingham Garage.
Yes. Because DRI headlined that one.
Yeah,
I think. I can't remember the running order besides that. Holy Terror definitely played.
Yeah.
I'm guessing napalm was maybe first, was it? Was it Napalm, Heresy, Holy Terror?
Oh, hang on. No, hang on. Wasn't Heresy opening?
It would have been one of the two of us.
Yeah.
We could have easily opened, because for a long time, Heresy were the sort of the reigning kings of that sort of hardcore scene, and the burgeoning crossover thing. Because they came out with some very fast music that was very impressive.
Yeah, I remember speaking to him at the time on the night, and they really were. You're right. They were kind of like the standard bearers, weren't they, for the UK scene?
Yep. Yeah, I think Napalm benefited from the timing and also the kind of tunnel vision, because I think Heresy came out all guns blazing, playing very fast, and then at a certain point they kind of slowed down a bit, and there were almost elements of melodic hardcore coming through. Yeah. And, you know, that was what they wanted to do, but I think it wasn't quite the thing that was going to set people on fire. You know, there was this sudden interest in really extreme fast music and short songs, and Napalm sort of appeared on most people's radar at a time when there was a high interest in that.
Yes, yeah. And also, I think Heresy were just that, they were a little bit more punky, weren't they? They were just a bit more hardcore.
Yeah, completely, because, I mean, what I would call the classic lineup of Napalm, Nick, Justin, Mick, that's on side A of Scum, that's kind of a hardcore band that's been listening to a lot of, or it sounds like it's been listening to a lot of Hellhammer and Celtic Frost as well.
Yeah.
So that's a nice combination. And then, you know, by the time Mick sort of assembled new versions of the band, you know, more of the death metal influence was coming in, but it stayed quite extreme, obviously, lots of blast beats all the way through.
Yeah, and still going to this very day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, look,
in a very different form, obviously.
Well, yeah, very, very different. Bill, can't thank you enough. That's been awesome. Thank you, mate.
Oh, thank you, H. No, that was a lot of fun. Cheers.
And yes, that was a lot of fun. I completely agree, rather selfishly. Look, I'm just really enjoyed doing that. And again, thanks to the patrons for great questions. And you can sign up for Patreon if you want. You know, it's there at patreon.com/Howard H. Smith. But thank you once again for listening to the podcast, for supporting the podcast. You are my greatest asset on spreading the word. Please do share the podcast. Please do tell everybody about it. And you know, just share it with somebody who likes podcasts and doesn't know about it, or maybe they do know about it and they've never got round to it, or maybe they used to listen to it and, you know, they stopped. I know what it's like. I dip in and out of podcasts myself, so, you know, I don't expect everyone to listen to every episode. You're gonna pick and choose, aren't you? And I know there's plenty of you out there who will, you know, skip my fucking 20 minutes of bullshit at the front of every podcast, and will happily just get straight to the interview. And that's fine, that's cool. Hey, everybody gets, if you get something out of it, even if it's just thinking I'm a wanker, then it's something, isn't it? I mean, I'll take that. Fuck it. Why not? So, as always, thank you very much for listening. Wherever you are, it's a pleasure to be in your ears. Thank you so much. Really do appreciate it. Really enjoying this. And got some great guests coming up for you. There's also more episodes of Old Bollocks on the way. It's all happening, guys. It's all fucking happening on Talking Bollocks. Until next time, be well. Catch you later.